Welcome to Frenetic. Let's begin. There's a specific kind of silence in this world that lacks peace. It's the quietness of someone who has endured immense suffering, a silence that doesn't demand attention, but desperately needs to be understood. A soul that has passed through fire doesn't emerge unchanged. It returns subdued, distant, and protective. This isn't due to a lack of love, but rather because it has witnessed the repercussions of love mishandled, leading it to conceal itself. Some might interpret this as coldness, while others may label you as overly serious, excessive, or too intense. Carl Jung, however, possessed a deeper insight. He stated, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The pain we suppress doesn't remain buried. It manifests in our manner of speaking, our involuntary reactions, and how we withdraw when someone approaches too closely. If you've ever gazed into a mirror and felt like a stranger to yourself, you are not alone. The persona you present, the strong, calm, smiling individual, isn't deception. It's the aspect of you that enabled your survival, the part that carried you through betrayal, abandonment, and humiliation." Jung termed this a persona, the social facade we adopt to navigate life. Yet, the peril arises when we forget the authentic self beneath it. Individuals who have suffered profoundly don't merely erect barriers. They construct entire worlds within themselves. These are intricate inner landscapes where they retreat when external life becomes too harsh. The outside world often misinterprets them. They aren't unreachable, but rather fearful that accessibility will lead to renewed shattering. They dread that softening will cause them to bleed, and that hoping will result in loss. Jung believed that pain isn't a punishment but a signal. He remarked, "There's no coming to consciousness without pain." However, we are never taught how to truly listen to pain. Instead, we are instructed to conceal it, numb it, or rationalize it, causing it to become a silent yet ever-present shadow. We may believe we've moved on, but in reality, we've merely adapted, functioned, and maintained facade. Meanwhile, the soul remains trapped in the moment of its breaking. Jung referred to this as the formation of a complex, an emotional entanglement buried in the unconscious, perpetually recurring until we summon the courage to confront it. Consider someone who grew up feeling invisible, not due to shouting, but because they were simply overlooked. Such a person doesn't forget. As adults, they meticulously analyze every message, every silence. They panic when someone withdraws, not out of neediness, but because the absence feels hauntingly familiar, like a room they were once confined within. When you observe someone overreacting, pause. You might not be witnessing their reaction to you, but rather their response to an old specter, a past hurt that found a similar resonance in your words or absence. They aren't irrational. They're operating in survival mode. To comprehend behavior of someone who has suffered is to approach sacred ground. You don't enter with judgment, but with reverence. Jung wisely stated, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. We are all uniquely shaped by our experiences. Some individuals become caretakers, not because they have an abundance to give, but because they struggle with receiving. They offer love as an apology, mending others to avoid confronting their own internal brokenness. They are commended for being strong, dependable, and kind, yet internally they are consumed by a profound silence. This is not love. It is an abandonment of the self. Others transform into lone wolves, hyper-independent and proud of never needing anyone. However, that pride often masks a childhood that taught them no one will arrive, leading them to cease asking for help. They undertake everything alone, not by choice, but because dependence feels perilous. Then there are those who perpetually reside in their minds, thinkers, analysts, philosophers. Yet, Behind this intellect often lies a deep wound, for the feel is to risk collapse, and they have spent too long painstakingly rebuilding themselves. Jung cautioned that overthinking is a defense against feeling, a mental barrier constructed from thoughts to prevent any emotion from penetrating. Others numb themselves with food, with constant activity, they strive for perfection not because they lack discipline, but because they lack safety. Chaos on the inside turns into control on the outside. Then there are those who emotionally vanish. You can talk to them, but you can't quite reach them. Their eyes are present but distant. They've learned to disappear without moving. Dissociation isn't weakness, it's intelligence. The psyche learned that when the body couldn't escape, the mind could. So, what do we do with all this? We stop judging, we start witnessing. We understand that every behavior is a story in disguise. We stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what am I still carrying? Jung's greatest contribution wasn't that he gave us answers. It's that he gave us language. He gave us a map to understand that our reactions are messages, our shadows are guides, and our pain is a dead end. It's a doorway. When you've suffered too much, love stops feeling like a dream and starts feeling like a test. Not because you want it to, but because you've learned through pain, through betrayal, through absence, that not everyone who says I care truly means it. So, when someone new walks into your life, you don't meet them with open arms. You meet them with quiet eyes, with a guarded heart, with questions you don't even speak out loud. Because this time, you want to feel safe before you feel seen. You watch, you notice, you scan. Not out of malice, but out of protection, because you've been blindsided before and the soul remembers. You pay attention to the way they speak, to how their stories shift. You don't accuse, but you do notice. A part of you is constantly asking, is this real, or am I about to be fooled again? You feel the energy behind their words more than the words themselves. When they say I'm fine, you hear what they're hiding. When they break a small promise, you may not say a word, but something inside you notes it, because you've learned that small inconsistencies can be the beginning of a big betrayal. And you don't want to live that again. So you become both the lover and the protector. You love in dozes. You open the door just enough to breathe. You wait, you watch. And when something feels off, even slightly, you feel in your body. Your gut twists, your chest tightens, your spirit whispers, this doesn't feel safe. It's not paranoia. It's wisdom earned from heartbreak. And even though part of you wants to trust, wants to hope, the other part remembers what happened the last time you ignored that whisper. So now you listen. You listen even when they say everything is fine. You listen. Even when they smile, you listen for what's missing, because you've learned that silence sometimes carries the truth louder than any word ever could. Maybe you wish it were different. Maybe you wish you could just relax, let go, fall in love where they say love is supposed to feel. Light, easy, flowing. But for you, love is weighty. It carries history, it carries memory, it carries ghosts. You walk into relationships with one hand on the door, not because you want to leave, but because you've had to leave before. You've had to save yourself before. So now, even when things are good, a part of you stays ready. Ready for the silence, ready for the shift, ready for the withdrawal. And that's not because you're broken. It's because you survived. But I know it's exhausting. Always reading the room, always double-checking the vibe, always trying to decode what someone really means. You want to trust, you want to rest, but resting feels risky. So you test, not to play games, but to see if they're steady. You'll ask little things, not to catch them, but to feel their energy. Will they show up when I'm quiet? Will they stay when I'm distant? Will they still care when I'm not easy to love? You're not asking for perfection. You never were. You're asking for truth, for steadiness, for someone who sees your shadows and doesn't flinch. You may stay quiet about your doubts, but inside you're asking, can I trust you? Will you lie to me? Are you here for me or for how I make you feel? And if you sense dishonesty, even just a hint, you feel like a siren. Maybe you don't confront it. Maybe you give them the benefit of the doubt. But a piece of you begins to close, quietly, internally, permanently, because when someone has lied to you before, especially someone you loved, your system doesn't forget. You notice the pause before their answer. You feel the shift in tone. You catch the avoidance in their eyes. And while others may miss it, you don't, because you've learned that pain doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it tiptoes in, hidden in kind words and soft smiles. So how do you move forward? You move slowly. You let your heart thaw one layer at a time. You watch not just what they say, but who they are when they think you're not watching. Do they care when you're silent? Do they reach out when you withdraw? Do they listen not just to your words, but to your pauses? That's how you know. When they lie about small things, about things that don't even seem to matter, it hurts more than they realize. Not because the lie was big, but because it triggered something old, something deep, something sacred. We begin by turning toward what hurts. We ask the questions. What do you want me to know? What are you trying to protect? What memory do you still guard like a treasure? Because that's the paradox of pain. It doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to be respected. It wants you to remember. And through that remembering, it begins to lose its grip. People who've suffered deeply often have a strange gift. They become mirrors. They see what others don't. They pick up on energy, tone, silence. They feel everything. But if they haven't yet healed, they can lose themselves in other people's emotions. They become rescuers, forgetting they also need to be rescued. True healing is not about always being the strong one. It's not about independence or wisdom or perfection. It's about becoming whole. And to be whole, we must stop cutting off parts of ourselves just because they make others uncomfortable. There is no shame in having walls. There's only sadness when we no longer remember why we built them. The journey, Jung said, is individuation, the becoming of who you really are. And that journey always passes through the underworld of your own psyche, through grief, through rage, through longing, through everything you were told to hide. You are not a problem to fix. You are a story to unfold. When we start listening to our pain without fear, something sacred happens. The wound becomes a teacher. The shadow stops shouting. And the inner child, the one who waited for someone to come back, to say the right words, to stay, begins to feel safe. And in that safety, we don't erase the past. We integrate it. We don't forget what happened. We learn how to carry it with tenderness. We don't pretend we're fine. We say, this still hurts, but I'm here. I'm not running anymore. The ones who've suffered most often become the gentlest souls because they know what it means to walk through fire barefoot. They don't seek to hurt. They seek to understand. But they also need to be reminded they deserve to be understood too. So if you are one of them, if your reactions sometimes surprise even you, if your silences are mistaken for disinterest, if your distance is really a scream for safety, you are not broken. You are layered. You are deep. You are a soul that learned to keep going even when the map disappeared. And now, maybe it's time to come home, not by force, but by love. Because healing isn't a destination. It's a return. A return to who you were before the world forgot how to hold you. Welcome back, dear one. Welcome to the wisdom gate, where your story matters, where your pain is not too much, where your soul remembers that it's never been alone. If this message touched you, Leave a comment below. I'm learning to come home to myself. Let that be your beginning.